Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Bernard Crespi, and I'm excited to have you join us today on this webinar. Our topic for today is very timely and critical when insurance doesn't cover a breach. So we'll be looking closely at a very recent case where an insurance company won't cover $5 million dollars in the city of Hamilton's claim for a cyber attack, citing lack of login security. So many organizations assume that cyber insurance policies will fully protect them when an incident occurs. But at this recent case of Hamilton breach, it highlights the reality can be very different. And in the business, legal and reputational consequences can be significant. So, to help me navigate this conversation, I'm joined by Steve Porter, CEO of SecureNet, a recognized leader in cybersecurity and PCI compliance. Steve has been in the front lines of helping businesses strengthen their security posture. And today, he'll share his expertise and opinions and what business leaders need to understand and act on before the next breach happens. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Bernard. I'm looking forward to this.
So, Steve, starting with Hamilton, what stood out when about this breach, and what lessons should business and organizational leaders take from it?
That's a broad question, but I'll try my best here. Um, I guess one of the things that stood out to my team and I when we were reviewing the article and some of the posts about it is, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, so I apologize, but it said a lack of security around logins and MFA, so multi-factor authentication. Um, when you read into some of the posts and the articles that we saw, it was very gray zone almost. It said the MFA wasn't implemented correctly or properly. Well, who determines what correctly or properly is? In this case, of course, it's the insurance company. But my question around it was simply, was the correctly or properly communicated correctly or properly to the client? And did they know what they had to do in order to meet the requirements of their policy? So there's sometimes there's a lot of gray zone in some of these things, and it's not always interpreted, in the same manner on both sides of the table.
So, and before we started talking about what guidelines or frameworks insurance companies are using to
Mhm.
determine what properly means.
Mhm.
And we know, from conversations, we have in the payment space, we have PCI, we have NIST, there's ISO.
Mhm.
Is it possible that insurance companies are using any number of these frameworks to determine what properly is?
Wholeheartedly. I can't imagine that any insurance company or firm is going out and creating their own cybersecurity standard when there's so many good ones already out there today. As you've mentioned, PCI, NIST, CSF, Common Security Framework, the CIS is another good standard. ISO 27001 is a global standard, of course. There's so many different ones out there that I sure hope that they're leaning on these standards. And from the documents and stuff I've seen from various insurance companies, I'm pretty confident that they are.
Well, talking about documents, as I was mentioning before, I mean, I've looked at our policy, looked at other policies. If specifically if you're capturing payment information,
Mhm.
they are provisions that stipulate that you have to uh, follow or be in compliance with the payment card industry guidelines, or
Mhm.
and refer in some instances to other agreements such as merchant agreements that you may have with the payment processors. So I'm curious, and again, we've been at this for a long time, and many times organizations will say to us, well, we have cybersecurity insurance, right? Which really, this is an eye opener. What happened here, because it's this false sense of confidence of security when you're saying, well, if I there's a little lapse in how I'm maintaining our security posture within the organization, that the insurance is going to cover us, but this is demonstrating otherwise. I'm guessing, why do so many companies assume that they're protected only to find out that that coverage doesn't really match their reality?
This has been a long running kind of issue. We've been seeing this for years with our client base. We have seen some changes over the years as well. I wholeheartedly agree with you. In the early days, a lot of companies were like, hey, we got cybersecurity insurance. We're good. If there's an incident, we're covered. But there's all these what ifs and buts and caveats and everything else that's in the legal language. And I'm not here to litigate any of the insurance companies'
Yeah.
policies or anything, not by any stretch of imagination. So please don't come out, don't attack me on that. But it's a case of having to have the right people in the room, having the right people review the policies, and asking the right questions of the policies and the insurance companies to make sure that you are, as much as I hate this phrase, but checking all the boxes to make sure that your policy will be enacted if or when an incident happens.
Well, you consult with a lot of organizations on the area of cybersecurity and PCI. How often does a conversation come about alignment with their insurance policy? Does that conversation come up frequently?
Um, in the early days, again, I'm talking like, 10, 12 years ago, even when cyber insurance first started, maybe it was before that even, uh, it wasn't really so much. People were just kind of checking off and going, yes, we'd like to pay for this. Thank you very much, and moving on. Nowadays, we're seeing it a lot more with our clients. A lot of our clients, even when they receive their annual policy or the questionnaire that goes with it, they will ask for one of our team to join them and say, hey, can you help us go through this? Can you help us do kind of a what's called a gap assessment to make sure that all the requirements and all the controls that the insurance provider is asking for are in place? And sometimes that goes in line with, hey, we're PCI compliant. We want to make sure this matches everything, or we're NIST certified, or we're ISO 27000, because no single standard, well, I shouldn't say no, but it's possible that the standard you're following may not apply to all of the requirements the insurer is looking for.
Yes.
So again, having a third party kind of help to, get the explanations or help you to formulate the questions to go back to your insurer and make sure everything is clear is very important. It's really no different than any other type of insurance.
Well, and I find it quite interesting because, I spent quite a bit of time reading through those merchant agreements,
Mhm,
and specifically areas that, of risk, obligations, what happens if you're breached,
mhm,
what are your obligations, what's your risk of loss
mhm,
in the event that you're not, say, in the case of PCI compliance, when you're processing cards, that if you do not abide by those standards and you're compromised, that you own 100% of that risk, and it's right there in black and white. And
mhm,
I am sure that now, they're going insurance companies are going to even become more aware, and they're going to use this as a precedent, in order where before it was a gray area. Are you compliant? Are you not compliant? Are we going to cover you? Are we not going to cover you? I think this has set a new pace for the level of responsibility that is being passed on to, the companies and merchants and the organizations. And if I was managing those contracts, and I was like, to your point, I mean, I think taking a look at that insurance policy, taking a look at what my obligations are with the merchant processors, and making sure that there's full alignment, now more than ever, that's critical.
mhm. Well, I mean, I would almost, I like to use the example of car insurance, right?
Hmm.
We all have it. We're all required by law to have it. But the insurance also, in many cases, are looking for loopholes almost to see who's to blame in the case of an accident.
Hmm.
If you're driving the speed limit and somebody hits you, okay, that's the other person's fault. If you were speeding and somebody hit you, now it could be equal responsibility or maybe completely
Hmm.
your fault because you weren't following the rules that are required for car insurance. Car insurance states you're going to follow all the road rules, et cetera, et cetera. you're going to be licensed, insured, et cetera, all these types of things. And if any one of those boxes is not checked, you're going to have a hard time getting any kind of payout or any kind of compensation in the event of an incident.
Well,
No
I
different for
think
cybersecurity coverage.
exactly, and I think this particular case, and it was covered here in Canadian news quite a bit because it did set up a tone, a pace for how other insurance companies are going to be able to handle,
Hmm.
uh, you know, call it coverage litigation, specifically when with at the pace of which organizations are being compromised.
Hmm.
uh, you know Again, we work with you quite a bit on and talking to customers around, there's this false sense of security when they say, well, we have a cybersecurity policy,
Yeah.
but now the standards for that you have to prove that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing are being put to the test, because it's no longer enough to have the cybersecurity. Is, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing
Hmm.
in order for you to even qualify to actually get a payout?
No, again, couldn't agree more. But sometimes though the standards. Let's talk about PCI since you and I are quite familiar with that standard. When we look at PCI, sometimes or most times, it's applied to the PCI environment of that organization. Now, in some companies, that might be the entire organization, like a payment processor like yourself. In other companies, like say a Walmart or something, that's a very small segment of their network, and those rules only need to be applied to that segment. What we do normally is we recommend our client base to apply the same rules of PCI across the entire organization, which gives you much better coverage, less gray zone about, well, was this correct or was that correct or was this in scope or was that in scope? So your insurance providers can see that you're taking the technical standard of a PCI assessment or even a NIST CSF and applying that across your entire organization. So it's proving that you have a security first mindset.
So what I'm hearing is not just what you've been talking for many years, the importance of having, cybersecurity resilience,
Mm-hmm.
but now more than ever it's become evident that lapses at every stage, because this is not just owned by IT, it's owned by finance, owned by operations. Everybody within an organization is responsible for security, but now there's even more at stake because that, call it that fallback, eh, call it safety net, or
Mm-hmm.
financial safety net in the event that something does go wrong. Now it's being put to the test. So now more than ever, organizations need to start checking, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And what is our risk? What is our liability? And it's not something that, we rely, going back to the auto insurance, because, if I get my car, I rent a car, I get hit, as long as I have insurance, I'm covered. But in this case, as well, there are certain provisions in place now that you may not be covered.
Right.
And it's time to actually start checking with all the stakeholders within the organization whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in order for that coverage to really be covering you.
Yeah, completely. And another thing I want to add to this, and I know it's a little bit probably not a direct response to your last statement, but the we can also kind of see the trend in the insurance coverage these days because with our company, for instance, when we first got cybersecurity insurance, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, whatever it was, um, the questionnaire was 5 questions. Hey, do you have backups? Do you have antivirus? Do you have a firewall? Like it was very basic, very high level, right? And it was so easy just to go, yep, check, 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 check. Great. We pay our however much money it was, we have our coverage. Nowadays, the questionnaires are multi page, usually. They're quite in depth. There's a lot more technicality to it. This is normally sent to whoever's handling that agreement with the insurance provider, probably finance or a senior executive. They're going to hand this off to the first technical person that comes to mind and say, here, go do this. And hopefully that person or that team has all the answers. So there's this you can see the shift from the insurers of trying to make sure that they are asking all the right questions and they are covering all the right topics to make sure that you as a client are um, properly secured against what the current threats are.
Yeah, I you know something, it's I always again say who owns security within the organization, and today, that's a whole other conversation. Um,
For another
but
time.
for another time, but specifically, we talk about insurance policies. We always talk about PCI, who owns PCI within the organization. That we know it's not just IT, it's finances,
Mhm.
operations. I think now there's even what really draws me towards this particular case is before, and I'm just saying insurance companies, or even from a business perspective, there's no conversation that could be had around, well, here's a case of an organization who, you know, did not follow the call it the whatever standards they were using. There was a lapse in security. They got compromised. They relied on the insurance because I mean, this was over $5 million. It's like $13
Mhm.
million or so. And the insurance company was able to prove that they did not follow the minimum requirements that they had in place. And the interesting thing, nobody, I'm going to assume that a lot of people did not know what those minimum requirements are. And I think that now other insurance companies are going to wake up, or already have woken up and looked at this as well. This is an opportunity for us not to start paying up. You know, we're going we're going to pass it on to our customers and the policyholders to follow whatever standard it is that they feel is most appropriate, for the insurance company. So, I mean, I did not like, I was looking at our cybersecurity insurance policy. I will tell you, it did not mention the standard that they required. I
Okay.
do remember that when we did our renewal, for the cyber side, we did obviously, we're PCI level one service provider, and
Mhm.
therefore we had to indicate such. And
Mhm.
if anything was to happen, they would actually fall back on that, and we have to prove that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So this opens up a whole, can of wax, in terms of worm, sorry, in terms of organizations started to, look at their insurance policies, what standards they're using for security, what operational procedures they have in place for security and for ensuring that they are following those, and not just be pointing fingers as who's responsible for this, because this is much bigger than just one department or one person's job. So now, looking ahead, Steve, if you were advising leadership team today, what are some of the actions that you think they should take today to start reducing some risk around, you know, these topics that we've been discussing today?
Um, Gee, there's a lot of different elements there, and I'm sure that your audience has probably heard a lot of these, and I apologize in advance, but it never hurts to reiterate. One, if you do have to follow any type of regulatory or compliance standards, a PCI, a NIST, a HIPAA, whatnot, if that is a narrow scope, and what I mean is if that's only affecting a single department or a single business unit in your company, you might want to take a look at it and see if you can expand that across the entire organization. That will provide you much better coverage, much better protection, security wise. And also, if it does come down to you have a security event, your insurance company is going to look more kindly upon that as well. Secondly, keep in mind, and I know consultants and assessors like myself have been talking about this for years now, but keep in mind that compliance and security need to become part of your business as usual. It's not a once a year event. Okay. The policies and procedures and the processes that you put in place, these need to be maintained throughout the year and followed throughout the year. Because it's one thing to say, oh, we do a, for argument's sake, we do a pen test once a year and that tells us we're secure for the rest of the year. No, it doesn't. it tells you that the stuff that you tested with your pen test were secure at that point in time. So you have to do other controls to make sure that that maintains and that stays up to date. Because again, if you are 1 day away from doing your pen test, for the annual review, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you need to do pen tests every month. Okay, no, I'm not saying that. But if you have, if you're that 1 day away, you get breached, but you haven't been keeping up with patching and vulnerability scanning and whatnot, that's not going to be looked upon favorably. So there's a lot of different controls that we all need to put in place. And most insurance policies today are asking a lot of questions around vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, incident response testing, making sure your backups work. So they're asking all these right questions to ensure that you are maintaining this and keeping it current. So those are a couple of things I would look at for sure.
So most organizations who may or may, when I think about the number percentage of organizations who are working with a third party cybersecurity organization such as yourselves
Mm-hmm.
are pretty much, I ourselves working in the payment space, we know that only small percentage use a third party. Most of them rely on call it self help
Mm-hmm.
approaches to it. What I hear, what I'm arriving to here is as it relates to insurance and making sure that there are no lapses in terms of your obligations, that even if you were, for instance, in PCI, uh, eligible for a self assessment questionnaire, that you do still work with a third party consultant to ensure that you're not just checking boxes like you referred to that before, but that you are in fact have everything in place that is required, so that you can go with confidence to the insurance company when you're filling out those, you said questionnaires as well, and indicate, yes, we are doing this. Because there is, there's the consequence that if you're just checking boxes, uh, you may not be covered. And so, therefore, working with a third party, I think, will give that level of confidence that there's alignment between what you're doing and the insurance requirements. And that's still, again, I go back to PCI, that even if you are uh, filling out the self assessment or you're following the self assessment questionnaire approach, that still there's value in working with a third party, cybersecurity and PCI QSA experts such as yourselves for the purpose of doing validation, so you
Mm-hmm.
are alignment with the insurance policy. And I think that, two other things that I'm going to add to this, and this you may need some help with it, like an organization may need help with this. Again, working with an organization such as yourselves or us, has to do with number one, making sure that they understand what all their requirements are. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, that they understand their merchant service agreement as well, because there's some legal, provisions in
Mm-hmm.
there that may impact insurance, and that they're making sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But what would be very helpful, and I mean, our time is coming up here, is what we're going to do right after this. I think, Steve, you and I will probably get together, put together a checklist
Mm-hmm.
that we can actually distribute to our listeners today. I mean, they can expect to see it. We'll make sure to post it together with this video, because I think that there's a lot of very good insights here. This is not complex in any way. It just has to be done in the proper way. Any last thoughts, Steve, before we wrap it up for the day?
Uh, Not really. I think we've covered most of the things, and without getting into a shameless self-promotion plug here, you know, working. I do agree with you that working with a third party would help to augment your internal teams. Okay, I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and hire a cybersecurity consulting firm to do this. Most organizations have an internal team or internal staff, at least, that can get this so far, but it never hurts to have that third party validation, that third party assurance that you've mentioned, because when your insurance company is looking at it and they see that you went with a third party, they have more comfort as well that there was an unbiased and neutral kind
And
of a view of things.
And I love what you said earlier. You know, when you are about to sign that insurance policy, when you're about to sign that merchant agreement, I always go back to that. It does help to get some, I'm going to call it, if you're not confident that you have all the answers, is easy to, engage with a consultant in
Hmm.
the area of cybersecurity and, PCI to actually ensure that there's alignment and that so now, Steve, thank you for sharing your expertise, and thank you, for joining us. This very specific case that we were discussing today, Hamilton, shows us that one thing very clearly, and that's that cyber insurance alone is not enough. That every business leader needs to understand what their risks are, strengthen their defenses before an incident actually does happen. And
Yes.
on behalf of Steve and myself, thank you again for being part of today's session. Stay secure, and we look forward to connecting with you on the next time.
Thank you so much.